All right, so welcome everybody. Boy, are we so excited. This is our first PLC book study session with the amazing co-authors, Nancy Hennessy and Julia Salomon. Wow. And what a wonderful evening it's going to be tonight to kick us off. For the Reading Comprehension Blueprint Activity Book, a practice and planning guide for teachers. My name's Dr. Pam Kastner, and I have the honor of serving as Patent State Lead for Literacy and having two of my amazing colleagues with me tonight. And I'll have them introduce themselves, and then we'll introduce Nancy and Julia more formally, and we'll get started.
Hi, everyone. Oh, sorry, Nicole. My name's Tamara Eisenberg. I'm a patent consultant as well, and just thrilled to be here learning with all of you tonight.
And I'm Nicole Kopka as well, patent consultant from the central office. Excited to be here as well.
Right, and then Nicole is going to do a formal introduction, although they probably do not need one. They're so famous,
Yes.
of Nancy Hennessy and Julia Salomon, and then we'll get started.
Yes, we're so excited to have Nancy Hennessy back with us, as well as Julia Salomon. So again, I'm going to turn it over to Nancy and Julia. So I'm going to turn it over to you ladies to kick us off for tonight.
Okay.
Awesome.
Well, thanks so much. First of all, let me thank Pam and both of you, Nicole and Tamara, for being here this evening and for inviting us, giving us this wonderful opportunity to be with so many of you to talk about our new book. Patton just does such outstanding work, and these consultants are phenomenal. So it's a joy to be with them again. So Julia and I are going to talk to you about the Reading Comprehension Blueprint activity book this evening. And hopefully you received chapters 1 and 2. Even better if you've received your book, that would be cool. But if not, you want to have your chapters available. Throughout each of these sessions, we will be using the book. We also want to say to you that this really was a labor of love. We recognize that all of you who are working with students or overseeing individuals working with students, whatever the role is that you have educationally, it's hard work. And we're always in need of more resource. So this is really why we made this decision to work on and create the activity book. I think many of you know that Julia and I have a bit of history. We're colleagues, we're friends. And Julia was represented in the original text as well. So it was a real joy because she's in classroom working with students, which of course I no longer do, I have in the past. And so she brought her wonderful experiences, and you see it throughout the book, throughout this activity book. So my privilege to work with her. All right. I think you both know a little something about each of us. If you don't, you can go to the book and read about our experiences, but we're coming to you as teachers so that as we work together, we'll learn together. We learn from you. We learn with you. And hopefully this will enable you to, serve those students that you're working with in the best possible way. So we wanted to do something in the way of introductions, and we thought you could put this in the chat. There's so many of you. It's wonderful to see so many individuals online. But if you would just add something in the chat in terms of who you are, what you do, where you're from, maybe a line on why you're joining this. And we won't be able to read every single one, but out loud, but we will scroll through them and take a look at these because we're most interested in knowing, who's with us this evening, who's learning with us. So why don't you take a moment and just share some of that information, and our wonderful facilitators here, along with Julia, can monitor that and kind of call out as they see you introducing yourself.
It's like coming in. Many I'm seeing.
Speech pathologist from Pittsburgh.
Reading specialist outside of Philly. English teacher, wanted to join in order to learn how to best help my students develop their comprehension skills.
Literacy lead.
Yeah.
EL teacher,
physician and parent,
New
Oh,
Jersey,
Manager, yeah. For the
literacy
school district.
specialist, middle school teacher,
Lancaster, Pittsburgh.
Title I elementary reading specialist. Erin Amy, I was just with you, Erin.
Oh,
Hi,
Hello.
Erin.
Montgomery
Wonderful
County,
consultant. Yeah.
School District of Lancaster, Huntington, Philadelphia,
Yeah.
Marietta, Georgia.
Oh, wow.
Philly,
Okay.
Philly representing.
Aw, here to have the district shift. I love that.
Yeah. Can some of you begin to tell us why you're joining? We would love to hear about that as well.
I feel like I need to learn more about the upper strands of the reading rope. Comprehension is so complex. Yeah. Thanks, Jamie. Yeah. Third grade reading specialist. Need to better organize my comprehension instruction. Learning support teacher, Pennsylvania. Comprehension.
Oh, better professor for my future special ed students at Penn State.
Oh,
Awesome.
wow. Terrific.
Very cool.
Alabama.
Yeah, we've got some Southern representation here.
Yes,
Some
we
of you may
do.
know that I'm coming to you from Kitty Hawk, North Carolina.
Passionate about reading.
Mm.
Indiana. Learn more about younger kiddos and dive deeper into the science of reading. Raleigh, North Carolina. Help with my English
Oh, I'll
language
be
learning.
ELs.
Monday.
How to help my ELs who can decode.
Yeah, yeah. All right, let's just take 2 or 3 more and
Strategies to build capacity.
mm,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Taking the course to help meet the needs of my struggling readers.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, thanks for doing that sharing. We want you all to feel very welcomed and very appreciated for all that you do.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So we do want to learn together, as I said, and one of the things that we wanted to uh, share with you is, and you've probably already noticed this in chapter 1 and chapter 2, if you've had an opportunity to peruse those, is there's a series of icons that really are inviting you as you're working your way through the activity book to participate in the process. And we're using some of those icons as well this evening. So you're going to see each chapter begins with a check-in. So it's really a reflect, and there's an opportunity to do some scripting. There are lexicon checks throughout because both Julia and I feel that it's so important that we have a common language. Oftentimes, we're reading about comprehension and different individuals in the field may use different terminology for the same thing. And so we wanted you to be certain that you understood what our language was conveying, all right? And so you could connect to it. There's also reflect and connect activities, opportunities to think through, wow, now that I've worked through this, now that we've talked about this and so on, how does it connect to what I'm doing? Tips for success. Every once in a while, we thought of something that we hadn't put right within the paragraphs themselves, and we thought these are really tips for success. So we'll be using some of those this evening. And then there are viewing and listening links at the end of each one of the chapters, and we'll point those out to you as well. So we want this to be participatory. We want you to use the chat. We'll go full screen occasionally, and we will have 2 breakout rooms during this session. So get ready. Get ready to share. All right. So just very quickly, I'm sure you've seen the table of contents, but I wanted to just make note of the fact that there are downloads available, and I checked on those today, and they weren't there, but they're there now. So just in case you you took a look and you couldn't find them, the publisher now made certain that they are there. And there are a number of templates and different types of activities in addition to or that support what you will find in each of the chapters. So you may want to take a look at that. This evening, as you know, we'll be looking at chapter 1 and 2, and really, these are the background knowledge chapters. And for many of you, this content may be review. Some of you may, in fact, have participated in a book study before for the original text, or perhaps you have the original text, or you've been listening and learning, from others. And so, but we want to be certain that we're all starting with the same foundation. The real focus, though, in this particular activity guide or book are really the ways of implementing the blueprint, and that's what the successive chapters are. What's just a little different, perhaps, in this particular book from the original text is chapter 8 goes a little deeper into expression of understanding, more of a connection to writing. So that's just nice to know about, I think. All right. So that's basically what the book is all about, but it is chock full. It is chock full of activity. That's why it's called an activity book. No kidding. All right. So what's the purpose? Well, when we begin to think about the purpose, we think about the fact that it certainly addresses the complexity, but what we wanted to do was continue to raise questions. I think we're always asking ourselves questions about what it is that we're doing in our specific settings. And so we wanted to raise what, why, how, when, and where, these varied aspects that have to do with reading comprehension in general, and then specifically to each of the critical contributors. So you'll see that's the way the book is organized. The other thing that we wanted to point out is while the book is complementary to the original text, it can be used as a standalone resource. And this is why at the beginnings of each of the chapters, we're talking about what do we mean by vocabulary? Why is vocabulary important before we get ourselves into the how, all right? And so the how really is the more significant part of each of the chapters once we start talking about these critical contributors. And the book certainly then, because of that, can be used as a standalone. There is a video, introductory video that Julia and I did. We asked that you take a look at it. I'm not sure the link that was listed is exactly right, but now that we have the downloadable resources available, it's also in those downloadable resources. And if you didn't have an opportunity or couldn't connect, you can always go back if you're interested in hearing us talk a little bit more about the book itself. But since you're doing a book study and since we're here with you, you probably don't need to do that now, since we've done just a little bit of an introduction with you. All right. So one of the things that I think Julia and I are very aware of is the expertise that all of you bring, the experiences that all of you bring. And while you're committed to continuing to learn, we want to always honor what it is that you know, what it is that you currently do, and also recognize that by being here, by participating, you're committing to change, and change takes courage and it takes time, and we're well aware of that. So one of the tips for success, you see the little person here jumping up and down, all excited. One of the tips for success that you find on page 1 in chapter 1 is keep in mind change takes time. Consider your current curriculum and specific context. A little bit at a time may be the best approach, all right? So, when I developed the blueprint itself, and then as Julia worked with me, actually on implementing it quite a while ago now, and when I was writing the original text, we continued to think about this complexity and the fact that one bite at a time, a little bit at a time. We also thought about, as we were doing the activity book, that, the blueprint is curriculum agnostic, all right? And so I think that's really important, that one step back, look at what you're currently doing, look at your particular context, and then make some decisions about how does this work within that framework, right? No two contexts are exactly the same. We can use the principles that we're finding in the activity book. We can use the activities themselves, but we know that you need to be thinking carefully about what's currently happening and then what might happen. Julia, did I convey that adequately, do you think? Yeah, we've had a lot of conversations about that. All right. Okay. So each and every time that you join us, you'll get a structured guide, and this was the first page of the structured guide, and of course it has the schedule on it. But also the structured guide asks you to be thinking about the chapters that you're going to be reading, and then it asks you to begin to reflect on and come prepared to share back your takeaways. And in the case of chapter 1, we asked you to think about takeaways that have to do with the why, the what, the how, the when, and the where. All right, so that's the way that chapter was organized. And then for chapter 2, we asked you to think about scripting an aha or a connection for the sections that had to deal with preparing for instruction, such as the critical understandings, the purpose and goals for reading, and then beginning to reflect on, and Julia is going to talk a great deal more about this evening, on unit organizers, and then how lesson plans are developed from that. So be thinking about that pre-work that you did and be thinking about how you can share that. We'll specifically ask for some of it from time to time. But if there's something that you want to add to the chat box as we move through, make sure that you share it with us. And if you have questions, make sure you ask us those questions. So of course, this session is focusing on chapters 1 and 2, the big ideas of the reading comprehension blueprint, as I just said, why, what, when, and where. And then chapter 2, implementing the blueprint, the beginnings of the blueprint, really preparing for instruction. All right. Within the book, you can tell I'm fond of quotes, but quotes that come from the experts. We can find at the beginning of the book this particular quote. I want you to take a moment. It's from Kate Nation, and I want you to read it to yourself and think about, what do you find particularly striking about this quote? What stands out for you? All right, if you have any thoughts about any particular part of the quote that you want to highlight, you can put that in the chat right now, right? And I'll just share a little bit with you as you're doing that, and then we'll see if we want to collect. So one of the things that I think is important to be looking at or thinking about here is this goal of comprehension, this ability to reconstruct the mental world of the writer. And we talk a great deal about creating a mental model or a situation model of the text, that overall understanding that we can take away and we can apply in varied situations. And so I think Kate Nation is referencing that. But I want to go a little further with this, and I want you to keep this in mind as you think about comprehension. Yes, we want to reconstruct the mental world of the writer. Why? Because we want to learn. So when we think about the ultimate goal of comprehension, I think we need to be thinking about that we want our students to be able to read well so that they can use reading as a vehicle, yes, for enjoyment, but particularly for learning. That comprehension is really all about learning and acquiring knowledge. And that, I think, is first and foremost. We talk a lot about knowledge, at least recently, although others have spoken to the importance of knowledge in the past. But I think we need to think about it in a global way, not just in specific ways. And we'll have more conversation about that. I think the other thing that stands out here is the complexity piece. And I love that Kate Nation says it feels effortless. Yeah, it feels effortless if you're a good reader, if you're proficient, if you're skilled. But pick up something that you're not used to reading. Even pick up, and Julia would attest to this working with older students, pick up a primary source document in history and try to make sense out of that. Yeah, okay. So that complexity piece. And then the last part of this, and this is common throughout when we look at the different theoretical models, is that there's a whole range of cognitive and linguistic operations that are at play here. And so this is really what the blueprint is about. This is really what, the overall thinking on comprehension needs to be. That it's not just a single skill, as you cats would say. It's not just a single skill. It's dependent upon many, many linguistic operations and cognitive processes. And that's important for us to keep in mind, particularly when we begin to think about those students who are struggling. Right. All right, so let's get into chapter 1, all right? And let's begin to work with the text itself. So what you will find in chapter 1 immediately is a check-in, and it's a connect to current knowledge and practice. So I want you to think for a moment about what the check-in is asking. I'm hoping that you had an opportunity to work with your chapter 1, and perhaps you scripted a brief response, all right? We're not going to collect these responses, but we're going to ask you to at least have that available to you. So if you didn't script a response, we'll give you a moment or two to do that now. Julia, did you have something you wanted to say? Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to add too, like thinking back to the other quote that we just talked about. One of the big themes was that idea of like it seems effortless. It's that sense of, how misleading that is. And just to your point, like I work at an upper school classroom and, faced with some of those primary source documents, it's humbling because in that terms, as reading like a historian, would read them. That's an area where it's hard. And I think too, to the point that like as our kids, get older, they're reading across those disciplines. And so it's really hard work and it is really complex. And people hit on that theme, I think, very well. They summed that up. So
Okay, cool. All right. So again, coming back to your check-in, your understanding of how the reader extracts and constructs meaning is foundational. How do you define or describe comprehension? And scripting a brief response. So always beginning, just as we do with our students, with surfacing what it is that we know, what we're bringing to, honoring what you're bringing to the task. All right. So let's begin to delve into those questions by bringing forward some of what we discuss in this particular chapter. And for those of you who have heard me speak to this issue of comprehension, you know that I'm enamored with this description. This is Ann Castles and colleagues. She and her colleagues wrote in a compendium on the reading wars, a descriptor of what we need to have in place for word recognition, but she also talked about reading comprehension. And I know there are multiple ways we can define and describe comprehension, and they are all valid and worthwhile, all right? But I think that, I should say, and I think, not but, and I think her descriptor is very very broad and allows for us to think broadly about, it's comprehensive, that's a better word. It's comprehensive. It allows us to think in a deeper way about comprehension. So of course she begins by talking about it's not a single entity that can be explained by a unified cognitive model. Now, again, for those of you who are familiar with this may be review, all right, renew. For some of it may be brand new. So bear with us as we make certain that we all have that same background knowledge as we move forward in this book study. All right. So here's the why. Okay. Again, all right. Thinking about not a single entity. And we know that that's well supported. It's well supported when we begin to look at the theoretical models, when we look at the visual metaphor that Hollis has provided, in order to understand what goes into reading comprehension, AKA skilled reading. Sometimes those terms are used synonymously. So certainly, I'm sure many of you, if not every single person this evening, is familiar with the reading rope, particularly the upper strands of the reading rope. We know how important the lower strands are. They're the on-ramp, all right? And if our students are still struggling reading by eye with word recognition, then we provide reading by ear for them so that they develop these upper strands of the rope, the language comprehension parts of the rope. What's interesting is as we look at other models, and this is the reading systems framework, for instance, we can see similarities in Chuck Perfetti's work as he describes the orthographic system, and then he also describes the system that has more to do with the comprehension of text. So linguistic and writing systems working hand in hand. We also can take a look at the simple view, right? And I want to take some time this evening. The simple view certainly is represented within the text, within the activity book. I want to take just a little bit of time to elaborate on the simple view this evening. Right. So we know that Goff and Tummer developed this in 1986, two critical factors that are necessary for reading comprehension. In 2020, Hoover and Tummer developed the cognitive foundations of reading. And as we take a look at the cognitive foundations of reading, we begin to again see the similarity that we see in the language comprehension strands of the rope, that we see in Perfetti's reading systems framework. Some of the terminology is different, but we're getting the sense that there's some really common contributors to overall reading comprehension. And so as we as we dig into Hoover and Tummer, we see language comprehension represented. Here it was linguistic comprehension. Here we have language comprehension, and they call it linguistic knowledge. And then they break linguistic knowledge down into different language systems, or subsystems, we should say. And they separate out, but also consider this under this broad heading of language comprehension, background knowledge, and inferencing skills, right? So again, I would say to you, keep these in mind. I'm going to talk about each of these in a moment, but keep these in mind as we think about what the blueprint ultimately calls for, because there's a direct connection. All right. So what do we mean by linguistic knowledge? Well, we're talking about this kind of internalized formal system that underlies our knowledge of how language works, right? So they provide us with a definition to get us thinking about, this development of oral language that eventually we as individuals, as teachers, as educators need to translate for our students into written language. They also then go a little bit further and begin to talk about, under this language comprehension umbrella, all right, under linguistic knowledge, what skills are we really talking about? So we're still doing the why, by the way, in terms of reading comprehension. And so the first thing that they talk about is phonological knowledge. And it might be that you're saying to yourself, wait a minute, I keep thinking about phonological knowledge being under that word recognition factor, that aspect of reading. And yes, we would agree with that. But they make a very important point. They make the point that, the phonology, this recognition of sound within word, the difference in one sound within a word changes the meaning of the word and its role in a sentence. And they give two examples here, but I'm sure you can think of many other examples. One of the ones that came to mind for me was, for instance, a simple word like duck, right? I can watch the ducks out here on the sound right outside my windows, right? And if I'm at a baseball game and a ball is coming my way, I better duck. So we can be thinking about the fact that words have multiple meanings, but then we can also think about just taking a simple word and just changing up a single sound within the word, right? As we see the example there, and it changes up the meaning of the word. So beyond multiple meanings, we also think about how the phoneme within a word can change the meaning of a word. We also can be thinking a bit about the semantic knowledge that students bring. And oftentimes when I'm working with a group, I'll say to them, well, what do we mean by semantics? How do you define semantics? Well, semantics have everything to do with the meaning of words or groups of words. And here they add, dependent upon how the words are arranged, right? For me, that directly connects to syntax, right? Syntax is the internal order in which we find our words within English language. Some people call it the architecture of the words, the phrases, and the clauses. So if we think a little bit about the fact that who or what did what, when, where, how, and why, all right, dependent upon now, and the duck example would be better used here, by the way. If we think about that word duck again, we can see that it has multiple meanings, and dependent upon where we find it in the sentence, we'll change it up. So semantics, the meaning of the words, phrases, and so on, but then where we use that word within a sentence is very often governed by the syntax, the internal order that we find within our language, right? So what's contributing then to linguistic knowledge? Phonological knowledge, syntactic knowledge, semantic knowledge, different types of knowledge, linguistic knowledge. And then, of course, we can talk about background knowledge. And what I really particularly like about the way that they elaborate on this is they talk about not only having prior knowledge, of the topic, what it is that we're reading about specific to the topic, but also they think a little bit here about integrating prior knowledge, but also integrating ideas within and between sentences. And for those of you who have perhaps delved deeply into this, you know that when we talk about sentence comprehension, we need to be thinking about not only who or what did what, when, where, how, and why, but also how ideas are linked up within and between sentences. That's a special type of inference. It's called local coherence inference, and they're actually citing it here. And then inferencing skills, of course, this ability to go below the surface of the text and using that background knowledge, thinking through not just what the author has specifically told us, the exact words and sentences, but what's implied within the text. So all of this, all right, all of this contributing to meaning. Now, what I think is interesting about this, to come back to why we're even having this conversation, is we are working off of that description of comprehension that says it's not, you can't talk about it as a single entity, all right? It's complex in nature, right? And whether you're looking at the reading rope, whether you're looking at the simple view elaborated here, whether you're looking at reading systems framework, some of you may know Nell Duke's model, it becomes very apparent that when we begin to talk about comprehension instruction, when we think about a blueprint or an instructional framework, it cannot just focus on one area of. It needs to be thinking, we need to be thinking about all these things that contribute to comprehension. All right. So the why, not a single entity, complex. All right. I'm going to go a little further with the why. I'm coming back to the description, Castles and colleagues. All right. And here we're thinking about it's the orchestrated product of a set of linguistic and cognitive processes. All right. So just to be certain, all right, that we're all on the same page, all right, we have a little bit of a lexicon check. So this is in your chapter. You can look at your chapter. It's also, if you have your book, even better, you can look at your book. And here what we're beginning to talk about is the fact that we need to be checking periodically, all right, throughout, that we have this common language. So I want you to be thinking about this, all right? I have a descriptor here, A, all right, indicators of what the reader knows and understands after reading is completed. And then B, those cognitive and language activities by which the reader arrives at those products. So take a moment now, and in the chat, all right, A, is it process or product? B, is it process or product? Let's see if you can respond, and we'll monitor the chat. Okay, what are we seeing?
I see a lot of A, products,
Yep.
B,
And
process.
B, process.
Okay, so we've got a sharp group with us this evening. All right.
Sure do.
They know their stuff. Okay, yeah. So this is the work of Rapp and colleagues, but there are others who speak to this, and certainly the outcome of comprehension is a product. But how we get there, quality processes equal quality products, right? How we get there are processes. And we've just talked a lot about language. So guess what? There are a lot of language processes that go into our ability to make meaning. All right. So just a quick definition of product. All right. I've used this slide several times over. Products for me, all right, have to do with those responses or those ways, activities that we ask our students to complete, all right, whether they're oral or written. And questions seem to be a good way of representing a product. So if I'm doing a read aloud with Antonio in first grade, Stand Tall, Molly Lou Mellon, and I say, what was her grandmother's message? All right. Antonio's ability to respond to that tells me whether or not he understood the text, and he understood it in a deep way, right? If you know this little text, it has everything to do with bullying, right? And so that's a product, that's an outcome, that's a demonstration of understanding. If I'm asking Kayla in fourth grade, Mystery of the Tattooed Money, what was different about this mummy? All right. Again, that's a product. Now, it's not at the same level as that first one, all right, because you can find the answer right there in the text. So different levels of understanding can be tapped into, but those different levels, if the student can respond in a way that demonstrates understanding, those are the products of comprehension. You might be thinking about standards. You might be thinking about the activities that you ask your students to do within your own curricula or program, right? And you should be bringing those forward and thinking about that as we're having this conversation, because very often what's happened, I think, in comprehension instruction is a real focus on product and strategies for products. For instance, main idea and detail, that's a product, all right? But how do you get there? And that's really what we also need to be thinking about. So a focus on both. The processes allow us to get to the product. So what are we talking about with processes? Well, in the definition, remember Castle said a set of linguistic and cognitive processes. Well, I turned to the work of Oak Hill and Kane for this, and they talk about different levels of language processing. So again, we could go back to the strings of the rope. We can go back to thinking about what that elaborated view of the simple view looked like, or even Perfetti's work, all right? And we can find similarities throughout. They're saying to us, the student has to be able to access the meaning of the words. So if I think instruction, I think vocabulary. We're also talking about the student being able to do what? That they can make sense of the sentences. So they understand the syntactic structures. They're able to make sense of the sentences. They're also able to do what? Integrate information from different sentences. We just saw that in the descriptor of the cognitive foundations, right? So this is a type of inference. They're also able to incorporate background knowledge and ideas to make sense of the implicit. We just also saw that represented, right? Oops, sorry, didn't mean to go on. And all of this allows them to do what? To organize up their thinking so that they create a mental model, that overall understanding of what it is that they've read that they can carry forward. So these are all language processes based on the development of oral language and then the translation into written language. All right, not enough to just look at that though. All right, Castles and colleagues goes a little further. All right, and where do they go? They say operating on text and interacting with background knowledge, features of the text, and the purpose and goals of the reading situation. So what immediately should come to mind for us, if we've read the research, if we know the science, is the Rand Reading Study Group report, their heuristic for thinking about this dynamic interaction that occurs between the reader, the text, the task, and the context, all right? And so as you begin to think about this, some of you, again, are very familiar with this. You know that the reader is bringing their cognitive, they're bringing their linguistic, they're bringing their attention, they're bringing their executive function. The text is coming with all sorts of complexities. We're going to do something with that in a moment, but you can think about vocabulary, you can think about sentence structure and so on. The activity is going to different levels of understanding, you know, surface code, exact meaning, literal to inferential. And then, of course, we always think about the context. For me, the initial context is the teacher, it's the school, it's the instruction being provided, but also there are other factors, socio-cultural factors that impact on the student's learning. All right, let's do a little something with this. Oh, and there's our little visual representations. All right, so let's consider the demands of this text. Let's bring this to life a little bit. And this is one of Julia's examples, all right? And this is from the text Persepolis, all right? And for those of you who don't know this story, it's the story of a young gal during the Iran Revolution, all right? And some of the changes that occurred culturally, educationally, and so on for children, for adults living through this. It's really a coming of age story. So I want you to think a little bit about this. I want you to read very quickly to yourself. And then in the chat box, this is a reflect and connect, but in the chat box, I want you to begin to tell us about what are some of the demands of this text. What does this text demand?
We've got some folks putting in historical knowledge. it demands how to read a graphic novel, knowledge of the graphic novel structure, vocabulary, background knowledge, like understanding capitalism, vocabulary, background knowledge, an understanding of the time period. Yeah, background knowledge, vocabulary, how to navigate speech bubbles, analyzing and close reading. So many different great things are coming in.
Yeah. And so here's some of the things that Julia contributed. This is really her slide. The meaning of these varied words. Yeah, the academic vocabulary, the academic language, capitalism, decadence, veiled. All right. Thinking through knowledge of Iran's cultural revolution, its impact on people's freedom, education, their livelihoods. So the importance of background knowledge specific to. And let's not forget about the understanding. And this is terrific that people came up with this, Julia?
They did great.
Yeah, graphic novels, structures like speech bubbles and captions and so on. Yeah. So thinking through, what that Rand heuristic really tells us is this dynamic interaction, and Castles and colleagues are pointing that out in their description. We have to be thinking about the interaction. We also can be thinking about what the reader does to make meaning. And in the text, this is really representative of the cognitive processes as well as the language processes combined that are necessary for the reader to really make meaning of the text. So considering what the reader does to make meaning, asking, first of all, what does this word, phrase, sentence mean? Which, who, or what is this about? What's happening? Why, where, how, and when? And immediately what I think should be coming to mind is the student needs to be bringing what? Their semantic and their syntactic knowledge, all right? And then how do these ideas connect? And are there clues to these connections? So again, they need to have an understanding of what we call cohesive devices in order to understand how sentences we can integrate within and between sentences. And then do I understand what I'm reading? What else do I need to do? Comprehension monitoring, a critical piece, very important as students are working through text. And then what do I know? Okay. What do I know that connects to what I am reading? How will that help me understand what the author meant but did not say? So here we begin to talk about that integration of background knowledge. And then what did the author want me to understand from reading this text? The big ideas, what am I taking away? So we begin with these micro processes, so these cognitive processes, identifying the idea units. We move to integrative processes, integrating ideas within and between. We move to metacognitive, monitoring understanding. We move to elaborative, integrating prior knowledge and inferencing. And then we move to that macro process level, the mental model level. And of course, this is somewhat recursive in nature, hence the arrows moving in both directions. All right. So important then that we be thinking about, why are we having this conversation? All right, I'll give you a moment to read through each of these. Right, so more than one researcher, Walter Kinch way back when with construction integration theory, and then Vandenbroek, and then Kendiao, are all pointing out to us that we need to understand, in order to provide appropriate instruction and intervention, what are the processes, what are the skills that students have to have in place in order to get to the product. And in fact, a problem with the product may, in fact, the source of that may, in fact, be in the processing. All right. So there are instructional implications. So the importance of understanding comprehension in a broad way, understanding the product process, and that it's complex. So one of the questions that I asked you to think about in the structured guide was the why, the science of reading, what's the takeaway? So I'm going to stop sharing now, all right? And I'm going to go to full screen, although we won't be able to see everyone. And you can raise your hand if you would like to share your thoughts on, what's the takeaway from this discussion or from this part of the chapter that you read in the book or in the chapters that we sent you. So let me stop the share. Oh, and I see some friends. Hi, Tony. Great to see you. All right. All right. So anyone who wants to unmute or raise their hand, We'll just do this for just a few moments because I'm watching our time and I want to make sure Julia has enough time for chapter 2. Yeah. Anyone want to share their takeaway from this particular section, the why, the science of reading? Don't be shy, it's risk-free. We want to learn from you.
I can be brave.
Oh, thanks. All right, be brave. Whoa, yay.
I'll just share my background too, in that I came out of the direct instruction world. So that's why I want to learn about this more, is just it's different language for me. But I think that what I took away is that we have to not see comprehension as like a skill that we teach, but we're using all of the components of the reading rope, and that it's a multi-layered onion with all of the language components, and that we want to look at the process to get to the answer and not focus too heavily on the product.
Well, that was very well said, Beth. Thanks. Thanks for taking the risk. I think you summed that up beautifully. It looks to me like Lori has her hand up. Lori Z, yeah. And I see some notes,
Hi.
by the way, in the coming up about not receiving the chapters. So I don't know, Pam, or if you want to respond to that. But go ahead, Lori.
Hi, yeah, thank you. I'm really enjoying it so far. Thank you so much. It's very understandable and I appreciate it. And my biggest takeaway from chapter 1 so far is the reminder of a little bit what the other speaker just said about the making sure we not only focus on the product, but the process. And so many times, I think when we think about the demands that we put on our students, we want to, we're always honing in on the comprehension, but we're not focusing enough on the process of each of these ways to get to the product. So great reminder. Thank you so much.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Jennifer has her hand up. So Jennifer, how about you?
Hi, yes. So one of my takeaways was that, as an English teacher, you think, okay, well, if I teach context clues and I teach inferencing and I teach the skills of identifying main idea, then my students will be able to apply those skills to any text. But then when you look at comprehension as not the end result skill, you realize that every single text is different. It comes with different fluency, different decoding, different language, different context. And so sometimes I think as teachers, we're surprised if a student gets a different text and the strategies that we put into place and teaching them how to identify theme and main idea and use context clues for vocabulary haven't transferred over, and then they don't score as well on those questions in relation to the next text. And so when I was looking at that, I was really kind of asking myself, well, wow, how do we get those students to use all of those skills to derive meaning from every text if we're not looking at comprehension as the skill? Because that's something that I guess I hadn't really thought that deeply about until I was looking at the blueprint.
Great, thanks, Jennifer. Yeah, and I think we can give you Katz a shout out here. He specifically talks about this. It is not a single skill. It is not a single strategy. We have to always be thinking about this complexity. Yeah. All right. Let me see if there's anyone else before I move back. All right. All right, Julia, as I go to find the PowerPoint.
Excuse
now.
me,
Oh,
I'm
sure.
so sorry.
It's okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So my name is Latoya Sam. I actually just started and I picked up this book. I apologize because I got the blueprint and not the activity one, so I'll get into that too. But I
Okay.
think the most important portion with that chapter 1 that I was looking at is that when we looked and the mandate came down that we all had to take in Pennsylvania structured literacy courses, and we had to do the 10 hours or what have you. And I think like a lot of the teachers, understandably, because you have a lot going on, past the 10 hours, they're like, all right, I've done it. I've got the structural literacy. I got it. But when you really do into the first chapter and it specifically talked about being explicit, not just in your teaching, but explicit in your understanding. I think that that was the biggest takeaway,
Okay. All right.
because just by taking 10-hour course or what have you, or what you actually read, that's not enough. It's really making sure that we put ourselves in there. Because I remember specifically the chapter that was talking about comprehension, and it specifically talked about sentence structure. And I remember thinking about it myself, thinking about passive and things like that. And when I taught sixth grade, I taught it, but did it really resonate when they went to their reading teacher? You know what I mean? And did I really understand it in the fact of when I'm teaching this child that has English as a second language? Did I really understand it at that point prior to taking the structured literacy course? So really, was I that effective because I wasn't as explicit in my instruction that I could have been because I wasn't as knowledgeable?
Yeah.
Victoria, as the
Thank
co-author
you.
of that course, thank you for saying
Yeah.
that. Because
Yeah.
I've always said it's the beginning, and I really appreciate your comments on that. Thank you so much. And I think you can see like lots of claps and hearts out there as well. And
Yeah.
and we have some others who want to share, so I'll let Julia
Mhm.
check that out.
All right, I'm going to go to Eileen and then Nina, and then I'm going to go back to, and Tony, I'll come back to you at some point because she's clapping. I loved, thanks, Tony. All right, so there we go, Eileen.
Hi there. So thank you so much for spending all this time with us, first of all. But second, I think that the most important thing about that I keep coming back to with structured literacy is I'm now a reading specialist, but for the last 9 years, I've been an English language teacher. And to me, that linchpin of language comprehension, that if you don't understand, like when I love the fact of the image you just showed us from the graphic novel, because I spent a summer wanting to master for myself how to read a graphic novel. But then when you look at the historical perspective and even bring it into today, would say about a quarter of our students are Muslims. So we have a lot of little girls in hijabs. So, so to them, they would understand, even though I've worked with just kindergartners right now, the difference and why, like having to wear it as opposing to choosing to wear a hijab, and just, and of course, adult women are taking a whole different point of view. But then when you talk about syntax and the way we put sentences together in different languages and how that affects our understanding, it's just such a mind-boggling thing that any of us learn another language or learn to read. And it's amazing. And it's like, how do we take those little pieces so that we can put it all together? And I think structured literacy really gives us a framework to move forward to giving understanding to all of our children.
Yeah, I almost put the graphic up tonight. So for structured literacy, yeah. All right, thank you. Nina, let's end this part with your comments. Yeah.
I just wanted to comment on the process again and how important that is, and teaching kids honestly that the process is really where you're going to get your meat. I think we've developed into this age where, okay, but is my answer correct? Is it right? Is it right? Is it right? And they're so worried about being correct that they're neglecting the process to get there. And then you have a whole bunch of kids that are missing pieces of something. So I just wanted to, I'm really excited about the process and talking about the process so I can take that back to them.
That's wonderful. Thanks so much, Nina. Okay, thank you, everyone. And I know there were lots of comments in the chat, so you're all seeing those. So benefit from the expertise of all your colleagues who are on. I want to get us back into, let me see if I can get us back into the PowerPoint. So let me go to share, and here we go. All right, hopefully you're all seeing it. Yes? Thumbs up? Okay, good. All right. All right. So, so just a tip for success, because these are embedded throughout the activity book. We've just been talking a lot about the language comprehension piece. Just always want to acknowledge, and we've acknowledged in the activity book, that the science of reading addresses not only word recognition, but also reading comprehension, fact, not fiction. There seems to be some rumors out there And informed comprehension instruction reflects this knowledge and includes the development of instructional approaches that align with the science. So we are right embedded with it, with the science of reading here. All right. So then the what and how in chapter 1 have everything to do with the reading comprehension blueprint. All right. And again, I'm going to watch my time, Julia, because I know I need to turn this over to you soon. So of course, here's the blueprint. And many of you, I recognize many faces and names, I think are familiar with the blueprint, but just very quickly, let me say this to you. The blueprint is not cast in concrete. It is aligned with the science. As you take a look at the blueprint, I'm sure you're recognizing, particularly on the left-hand side under text reading, some of the strands of the rope, some of the language systems we just talked about in terms of cognitive foundations. All right. What may be a little different on the left-hand side is preparing for instruction. One of the things that I thought about as I worked with teachers, some of whom I think are on this evening, Aviva being one, and maybe Bo, and also Julia, I really thought a great deal about how important it was that our students are walking away from text learning something, that they're walking away with enduring understandings, big ideas that they can build over time. And so we acknowledge here in getting ready for instruction that we have to identify what is it we want our students to take away. Not only what can they do, what do they are they able to do? What are the literacy goals and objectives? But what are the content, the knowledge goals that we have for our students? So you see represented here critical understandings, big ideas, and you see purpose for reading, content and literacy instructional goals. And then, of course, you see text reading. What are these contributors that we've been talking about? And they're represented here. There's vocabulary, accessing word meaning. There's language structures with a focus on syntactic sense and structure and sense of sentence. There's knowledge, different types of knowledge, text structure knowledge, that's a specialized type of knowledge, background knowledge, actually. And then background knowledge specific to the topic. And of course, levels of understanding and inference, being able to work with the text and express your understanding at different levels, and then expression of understanding. The right-hand side, all of those questions that have to do with instructional practice are based in the work of the experts. They're based in research. So while the wording may be mine, all right, the wording comes directly from what it is that we've learned over time that we should be asking ourselves as educators. Okay. So when you think a little bit about this blueprint, which hopefully most of you were able to review or you brought your knowledge, how would you describe it? I want you to take a moment now in the chat box, and I want you to script just a few words describing the blueprint. How would you describe it? What are we seeing in the chat box?
Guided thinking framework.
Ah, that's a nice way to think about it. Okay.
Helps outline the processes needed to understand, a scaffold for quality instructional design, roadmap to direct learning, a framework for instructional planning. I know these are also good. A guide for delivering instruction, a comprehensive framework for literacy instruction, purposeful planning, tips on scaffolding, what you're teaching, knowledgeable purposeful plan, a navigational tool for structured literacy, both broad and detailed, intentional instruction. And someone did put a question about further understanding the arrow, which I know we'll be talking about a bit more, so more to come. A scaffold of a plan for teaching, a guide for action, flexible, prompting teachers to address both process and product, curiosity based in science.
All right, so we've got it. All right, write some of those down if you can, Julia. Those are
I
great.
know, I'm going to.
So I've described it in this way. It's an evidence-based framework. You can see the science reflected in the blueprint. It's identifying critical competencies we need to be attending to. There are other things we should attend to as well, but those are the primary ones. It does call for informed routine strategies and activities. So I'm not dissing strategies, but strategies in the service of both process and product. It structures and scaffolds instruction. It allows fidelity with flexibility. I think that's really important. And the bidirectional arrow has a lot to do with that flexibility. We'll talk about that in a moment. And it recognizes the ultimate goal of comprehension. To the right, you see the comprehension house, which Julia is going to talk a little bit more about, but this also identifies the critical understandings, but some of those competencies that are necessary. Here's the one thing I want you to always keep in mind. It is a framework. It is an instructional guide. It is not a unit organizer or unit plan. It is not a lesson plan. They are derived from that, and the activity book directly gives examples of that and does that, right? It shows how one uses the blueprint in order to design instruction, whether it's a lesson plan or a unit organizer. All right. So how, when, and where, all right, just a little bit more. There's the bidirectional arrow again. And when we talk about the bidirectional arrow, we're answering the questions of when and where in many ways, before, during, and after reading strategies and activities. This is instructional decision-making on the part of the teacher when they are going to address word meaning, sentence comprehension, the building of knowledge, the questioning of. Certainly, some of those things do happen before. For instance, vocabulary building often does, but there's some flexibility that one can engage in terms of when instruction is delivered in these specific areas. The other thing to think about is the blueprint is designed to be used with whole class, small group, whole group, small group, or even one-to-one intensive instruction. But again, the adaptations have to be made, as I said earlier, for the students that you're working with. So it's flexible, but there's a fidelity issue that's here as well. All right. All right, so this is the last activity for chapter 1. Wow, I'm really eating into time here. So we're going to do breakout rooms, believe it or not, with so many of you. All right. And I think there's going to be about 7 or 8 of you in the breakout room. All right. And I asked you to do a check-in. And some of you have already shared some of this thinking, but a check-in in terms of how you come to comprehension, how you define, how you describe. Now, what I want you to be thinking about, and this again is right within your text, how has this information influenced you, your thinking about comprehension? What are the implications, script or response? Now, your book would call for scripting the response. You can quickly do that if you want, but you are going to go into breakout rooms, and I'm going to say this to you. There are going to be 7 to 8 of you. Take no more than a minute to share your response. So we'll do 8 minutes. That's all we're doing. All right. So that Julia has enough time for chapter 2. All right. And then we'll bring you back. And typically when we bring you back, we have you share out, but we won't be doing that this evening. All right. Because we've had some great participation so far. All right. So make sure that you share the airtime. Do round robin, even though I'm not a round robin fan, but one at a time. All right. And take no more than a minute because we will bring you back. So are we ready with our breakout rooms? We've got our facilitators who are working on these, I think, Nicole and Tamara. Yes?
Yep, looks like they're ready to go.
Oh, all right, let's go. All right. All right, everybody get ready.
Were we put in breakout rooms?
Hey, Aviva. Oh, hopefully you are. If not,
Maybe because I joined on I had to rejoin from my computer when I got home. Thank you. Good to see
I
you.
wasn't invited to a room that I saw either. Oh, there we go.
all right, just let us know if you're not in a room. Hi, Holly.
I'm not in a room either. I had to switch from my phone to the computer.
Okay. All right. Let's see what happens with Holly and Janine here, if we can get them into rooms. Thank God for facilitators.
I know.
All right. Well, Holly's
I
kind of,
think
Janine's still waiting. Yeah.
there we go.
Good job, ladies. Wow.
Thank you.
All right, that took a little more time, Julia, than I thought it would. So
They're really great. They were just good, good
We're
contribution.
all good? We're all good?
Yep, we're
great.
perfect.
Yes,
Thank you.
Nicole.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tamara.
Do we have one more person that's not assigned? Wait.
Bo might not be assigned. He
I
was.
think they're assigned, but they didn't join.
Oh, okay.
Wait, one more. Hold on. I don't know who this person is. Ask to unmute.
Is it ROYBO?
Yeah, I'm asking to unmute, but I can't unmute them.
Oh. Oh dear. Okay.
Okay, well, I can't unmute them and okay.
So are they're assigned to a room and they just haven't gone to one? Is that the deal?
Yeah, I think they're assigned to room 14.
Okay. Wow. How many rooms do you have?
14.
14.
I think there's 110 participants.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Wow.
Wonderful.
Out of, we had it open to 150 participants, so that's pretty good. I mean,
awesome.
and that's not counting us. That's not counting facilitator. So yeah.
Somebody else just joined.
Okay.
So Julia, will you be okay? I mean, you can maybe.
Hi. I'm so sorry. I was in a breakout room and I had to fix my privacy restrictions to enable my camera, and so I was disconnected. I'm not sure if someone can put me back in the room.
Can I put you in a room? Can I?
Yeah, I was in one already. I feel like maybe it was like 9, but I didn't realize it was going to kick me out.
Oh, okay. Let me see if I can put you in a different room. Let's see if I can assign to room 9, you said?
I feel like it was 9. Oh, that is it. That's it. Thank you so much. Sorry.
All right, good.
Okay, Mrs. Walks, can I put you in a room? Were you in a room?
Oh yeah, there's a few people still.
Yeah, Mrs. Walks, can I put you in a room? Let's see what room.
She's in 14. She's assigned to 14.
Okay, let me see if I can put her back in 14. No, 2.
Yeah, Nancy, I think we'll be fine.
Think so? Okay.
I mean, I'd like to leave more time for that breakout room conversation.
Yeah.
And they range in number. I think 9 was the
Yeah,
biggest.
we have a couple people that are hanging out not in their rooms. We have
Yeah, maybe they've stepped away.
yeah.
Do you think that we should have the conversation and then kind of again like not debrief as a whole group just in the interest of time?
Yeah, I don't think we'll be able to debrief. We could start next week with kind of a debrief on and because I think that last slide, right?
Yeah, that's what I think we should. Yeah, we'll just start next week with like talking about like the one that they pick to go into. That works.
Yeah, we have 3 people that didn't go into their breakout room.
Okay. It'll be good to do norms next time for everyone, just so.
It's a great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure where they are because they're not responding.
Yeah.
3 out of 110 isn't bad.
It's a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were worried about being able to even do.
Okay, are we back on?
I think so. We're back on. Okay, so just my very last slide about this particular chapter. Don't forget that we've included viewing links or audio links at the end of each chapter. This one happens to be an expert moment thinking about comprehension. And I added something here when I showed you the Rand Reading Study Group report, I actually wrote a descriptor of that for this new site called the Reading Universe, which Reading Rockets in collaboration with the Barksdale Institute, which is the group that was primarily responsible with others for Mississippi Rising, the change in scores in Mississippi. So you may want to take a look at this particular article that I wrote for them, and it's a great site with other resources as well. And you may have some other sites that you want to share, so make sure you put those in the chat for everybody. All right. Okay, so we're going to chapter 2, and I'm handing this off now to my colleague and good friend, Julia Salomon. So here you go, Julia.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to start talking about implementation and how we prepare for instruction. But before we get into that, this is just, another quick opportunity for you to check in. But thinking about your current comprehension curriculum, your current materials that you're working with, how does your current comprehension instruction address those acquisition of knowledge and critical language skills and processes? So jot down a couple of thoughts, take a couple moments to do that. So how does it address those acquisition of knowledge and the critical language skills and processes? And we're going to talk a little bit more about what that looks like and how that looks like in different classrooms. All right.
And I'll just move you to the next.
Yeah, I think we can keep going. Go ahead, Nancy. And while you're doing that, I'm going to take a minute and I'm going to read to you from a little bit more about the unit organizer. And so Nancy talked about this earlier, but the blueprint is the framework for informed instruction. But the unit organizer, it's a tool for making the design and delivery of instruction visible. So this really serves as an instructional map, and it can help educators chart and stay the course of instruction by connecting their yearly goals with their everyday instructional planning. So really important. And it also provides this foundation for the design of your lesson plans, which are really necessary for accomplishing these goals. We're going to talk a little bit about the unit plan that we incorporated into the workbook and how that then you'll see later on how that the lessons build from that. But when we think about our unit plan, it really begins with the identification of the critical topics and enduring understandings, right? These big ideas and concepts, but it also provides the vehicles for, thinking about how we connect to our central questions, our overall purpose, and then thinking about interdisciplinary links, resources, and so forth. So this is our unit plan, and it's on pages 9 and 10 of the workbook. And again, when we think about this unit plan, we're really starting to think about this idea that we want to help us stay on track throughout the year. And you can see the following components here. And we're going to be going through kind of most of the topics on this slide. So we have enduring understandings, our essential questions, our content and our literacy goals, which are really connected to our purpose. And then, thank you. And then we have, again, literacy goals is at the top of this with the screenshot, but our resources, our interdisciplinary links, so how we can create opportunities for there to be connections to other subjects, other classes, and then our evidence of learning. All right, so tonight, and this tool is available for you on the Padlet. Nancy and I have been doing a lot of thinking about curriculum, and oftentimes that this idea that we as teachers, we enter our classrooms and we are handed materials with which to teach. I'm really fortunate. I teach at an independent school where, teachers have choice and kind of autonomy in designing their curriculum units, but that's not always the case. So we really started to think about a way to help educators make informed decisions about the materials that they're working with, especially when you don't have the ability to, craft or create your own units, right? So it's our hope that this tool, which features a series of guiding questions, is really to help educators reflect on their current curriculums and think a little bit about what the strengths of that curriculum are, right? Finding the examples of that. thinking about areas for development, and then again, like making that action plan and thinking about next steps. So we're going to be really focusing on these top two buckets tonight. So thinking about the critical understandings and the essential questions. So we'll be focusing on that. But again, this review tool looks at all aspects of the unit plan and kind of breaks it down and has the guiding questions to help educators think critically about the curriculum that they're working with.
Yeah, so the tool really will align with each of the sessions that we'll be doing with you, because we'll be looking at, as you can see, it aligns with the blueprint itself. All right. All right. So there we go.
Thank you. So we're going to start off by talking about, like I said, our critical understandings and purpose, right? So this is where we prepare for our instruction and, thinking about the informed educator, asking ourselves, well, what do you want your students to be able to know, understand, be able to do? And then thinking about your content and literacy goals and objectives. So I think this is a really good point, and I actually saw something in the chat thinking about curriculum solely based on strategies, right? So Shanahan, this is a great quote. Too often the emphasis of a reading lesson is so much on the reading skill or strategy that the opportunity to expand children's understanding of their world is lost. So this idea that reading lessons need to have double outcomes, an improvement in reading ability, right? But also increased knowledge about whatever they read. And I think, Nancy, it might be that E.D. Hirsch quote about, strategies are fine, they're great, but unless you have background knowledge on topic, it's like, what's the so what here, right? So I think when we think about acquiring the knowledge of critical topics, and enduring understandings, this is really going to align to our content goals, whereas our literacy goals are really connected to those critical language skills and provides the basis for those. All right. So we have some tips for success for you, and you can take a minute and we'll let you read these tips to yourself, but just some kind of an overview about thinking about these critical understandings and what the characteristics they have and sort of what they get at, what they get at the heart of. And we're going to talk a little bit more about these in a few slides from now. But I think, the idea that really stands out to me here is this idea that and a critical understanding can be revisited and built upon and deepened. This knowledge can be deepened. So this idea is not one and done, but really we're thinking about our kids as they progress, and we can build upon their understanding. And we're going to model around with our unit plan identity. So really thinking about them as something that can continue to grow. Thanks, Nancy. So we're going to talk first about these enduring understandings. So in our unit plan, we have two sets of enduring understandings. So we're really looking at two different grade levels here side by side, because again, we really wanted to show how something can change and deepen and develop over time an idea, critical understanding like identity. So for our unit plan, you can see we'll be talking about a first grade unit, which is called All About Me and looks at identity through a first grade lens. And then we have our 8th grade unit, which is Who Am I? And that really looks at, again, identity building from a more middle school perspective. All right, so critical understandings. I really, there's a quote, Wiggins and McTighe, they talk about enduring understandings and essential questions are the thread that links units and lessons and year-to-year teaching. They provide powerful tools for focusing daily classroom activities, to think about our curriculum, and they help us answer the question, and I love this, why does it matter? So we have the school at which I work, the Haverford School, we've been doing some curriculum work, and I thought this visual here is really great, kind of getting at this idea of what a critical understanding is. So thinking about, we've got in the bucket, outside, things that are worth being familiar with, right? As we drill down, we get a little bit more specific things that are important to know and to do. And then at the heart of that are these big ideas and critical understandings. And I think when we're thinking about them, right, we want to be able to ask ourselves, again, what do we want our students to know and understand after participating in a unit or reading a text, right? What are the critical concepts and understandings we want them to acquire? And then are these understandings reflected in texts and activities that are taught? So again, you can see here this idea of the theme of identity. And again, in our grade 1 unit, right, really developmentally appropriate critical understandings. I'm unique. There's nobody else like me. I have likes, dislikes, strengths, and challenges. They begin to think about family and classroom community and what makes them unique. Whereas in 8th grade, we can start to really think about these critical understandings and build upon them, right? So identity is super complex and it shows itself in many different ways. People have multiple identities, how society can impact one's identity, and then thinking about, how important it is to see my identity reflected in the world around me, but also to see other identities as well. So really important things to think about and kind of apply, again, that growth between 1st to 8th grade.
Yeah, there's a couple of comments in the chat, Julia, about curricula or programs that focus on knowledge building, that focus on these big ideas, things like wit and wisdom, CKLA.
Yeah.
And then someone making a comment, these are the building blocks for a democratic society. Yeah. So all of you need to be thinking about what you currently use. And, it might be that these are expressed as topics or themes, but the importance of acknowledging that, again, what's the ultimate goal of comprehension? How do you get there? But what's the ultimate goal? Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Move on,
So, yeah. So essential questions, they really represent our enduring understandings, and they can't be answered right with a simple yes or no. They're really important to kind of drive student interest, but they're also kind of connected to the overall pieces that you want students to understand. So they have this very, important purpose. You can go ahead, Nance.
Oh, sorry. Yeah,
that's okay. So again, Wiggins and McTighe, understanding by design, really great. And this idea that essential questions have these characteristics, right? So they're open-ended. Like I said, they're not going to have a single yes or no answer. They're thought-provoking. We want them to be things that are going to incite interest for our learners, that they're going to really want to talk about and they're going to want to explore in a deeper way. They're higher order thinking. This is something that I've been having a lot of conversations about with our upper school faculty right now, this idea of like higher order thinking and critical thinking and how to foster that. Well, these sorts of questions, that's what they call for. They really point towards these important transferable ideas that can be within disciplines, but sometimes across disciplines as well. They raise additional questions, they require support and justification, and then they recur over time so that they can kind of be broadened and defined as kids progress. Again, this idea that we're not just one and done with an idea. For example, identity, it can change, and as children grow and develop, that thinking about that topic or idea changes. So these are a few of our different and questions, essential questions that link to our All About Me unit and to our Who Am I unit. All right. And then really thinking about our content goals and our literacy goals. So it's important to consider when I think about this, Nancy, you can go to the next slide for us. So we really think about how our enduring understandings and critical concepts, right? They're connected to our content goals. So you can see here some of the questions that align to that, right? How is identity shaped? Can we have more than one identity? And then we have this idea of societal views can influence our individual identities. That's connected to our content goals. our literacy goals are connected to those language processes, right? So when we think about this unit, my first grade, some of their goals were to identify and discuss story elements, right? So think about characters, setting, events, the kind of basic story grammar markers. Sometimes it was to state what authors and illustrators do. So kind of thinking about those literacy skills that are appropriate at that age range. Well, those goals broaden and develop and deepen over time. So 8th graders, right? They're really thinking about in this unit that there are many variations of the narrative genre. They're thinking about the nature of memoir. So you can see how, again, how this idea has really kind of, it's been refined, it's broadened over time. And again, we're really thinking about how those literacy goals, how we can build that knowledge. All right. So we are going to have a breakout room, and this is going to be, we're going to have a little bit of a longer breakout room because folks, we want to have everybody have an opportunity to talk. So what we would love for you to do is to think about a unit or a text within your current curriculum, or it could be something that you would like to teach. And then using these questions as a guide. So these questions are available for you on the Padlet. Reflect on the use of critical understandings and essential questions in that unit or text that you teach. So what we want you to consider when you're thinking about critical understandings of the text, right? What are the units or text major takeaways? Do the ideas have lasting value? Are these understandings reflected in the text and the activities taught? And then how might you improve upon or refine those understandings targeted, right? For our essential questions, does the use of essential questions drive purposeful learning? So thinking about the questions, if you have questions, maybe that's something that's an action item. Maybe it's developing those essential questions, right? But if you do have them, do they drive purposeful learning? Are they thought-provoking? Do they really support that critical understandings and that critical thinking that we talked about? And then how could you improve upon or refine? So again, this idea that we as educators sometimes go into classrooms and are given things, and how we think about them and review them and think about the strengths, right, that your curriculum may have, thinking about those areas for development, and then thinking about potential next steps. So this is really kind of, this is a new tool for us, but I'm really excited to hear some of the discussions that I'm seeing, even some of the comments in the chat already. So we're going to put you into breakout rooms. We're going to take, Nancy, what do you think on time?
I think we could take the 15 minutes.
Let's do the 15 minutes. Okay.
Yeah. And I would just say, remember we said that the blueprint itself, this is the first part of the blueprint, that preparing for instruction, is curriculum agnostic. So we're really trying to give you a tool, a way of thinking about what you currently do, what your current curricular program is, and how it aligns, and what are some of the action steps that you might have to take to make it more aligned with this thinking. Okay.
Okay.
Awesome.
Open you.
We're ready.
Yeah, I could see in the chat, Julia, they were talking about different curricula. So
Yeah.
Nicole, do we want to pause the recording? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm looking at welcome back, everybody. I see folks coming in. Some folks are still finishing up their conversations. I think the breakout rooms have about 25 seconds left. So once everybody's back in, we're going to try something that I was just introduced to. I just learned something new. So we'll give it a whirl. I'm excited to try it.
Since we have like 10 seconds, can I just make a comment?
Sure.
Something that jumped off the page to me, looking at the table on page 11 is I'm also reading right now How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci, and his chapter is about curiosità. And so it's just about being curious. And I love like how this isn't telling you statements about what to do. It's asking you questions to make you think, which is what we want our readers, learners to do. So it's like yeah, all the layers are in place for being curious.
Ah, okay,
Yeah,
good.
I love that. I think I've learned so much from Nancy just about that, like the metacognition too of teaching, like that reflective piece, and kind of like that's like the guiding questions for me. It's always thinking about, oh, how can I reflect and hone and refine? So yeah, I've really learned a lot about that from Nancy.
Thank you.
So welcome back. I think everybody's back. So we're gonna try something new. I just found out about a waterfall chat. So what you're gonna do is right now I want you, we don't have enough time. Normally we would stop the screen and we would share with folks, but I want you to think about one takeaway from the conversations that you had with your group and type it into the chat, but don't hit submit yet. And then we're gonna count down. We'll do 3, 2, 1, and then it will be like a waterfall, and then we'll do shout outs. So I'll give you guys like 1 or 2 moments to think about one takeaway from your conversations and just hold on to it, and then we'll count down and we'll see what everybody's thoughts were. And I think this is something that's particularly exciting to me. I think, you know, we talk about this, and Nicole Puglisi, colleague, Nancy and I, we talk about we're the sum of all of our teachers, and this idea that we learn so much, I think, from all of you. So your thinking on this is just, I'm really excited to hear more. All right, so I'll give folks maybe like 1 more minute. Just a major takeaway. All right, and then I'm going to count down. And so I'll count down to 1 and everybody just hit send and we'll check out our all of the comments. So 3, 2, 1, waterfall. Ooh, fancy. I like it.
Yeah.
Wow. And these are awesome. I'm really excited to read some of these.
I love the approach of looking at content goals and literacy goals. Wow.
Mhm.
Planning purposeful lessons is essential to student engagement and universal learning. Who else wants to shout out
Oh,
here?
I like this one. Importance of developing critical understandings that allow students to extend their learning beyond the classroom walls. Language matters. Learners need to know what you are asking. Comprehension in the conversation about text is equally important.
Teachers need to understand what they are reading so they can help their students understand what they are reading.
Yeah.
This
Oh,
looks
that's
different based
awesome.
on the makeup of your school, the support you receive and how it's interpreted. Yes. Your context. Yes. Shift to critical understanding and essential questions.
I like this. And understanding that implementation of new curriculum takes time and may not go in the same pace as the school down the road. That's so true. And I think especially if you're thinking about if you're working with a curriculum that's given to you, like it takes a lot of like thinking and it can take time. And, you know, that's something to really honor.
Importance of developing critical understandings that allow students to extend their learning beyond the classroom walls. Yep. Language matters. The learners need to know what you're asking. Comprehension in the conversation about the text is equally important. Yes. Move from oral to written. Always. Yeah. Good, good, good.
There's no consistency across the nation in terms of curriculum and what is priority. Teachers of structure literacy try to find a way. Importance of vocabulary.
Yeah, we start with good intentions with essential questions, and then we get lost in the text and lose sight of the essential questions. We need to flip our teaching and thinking. Yeah.
Yeah.
Shifts. Yeah, shifts. Yeah.
These are great.
And there's been a couple about vocab. I think the importance of vocabulary.
Yeah. Yeah, I think about
Understanding.
time too.
I love that. We're going to talk about that, connecting your vocabulary to
Yep.
those big ideas. Love it.
Yeah. I like this one. It says, giving teachers time and space to think beyond curriculum materials and really unpack the critical learnings. I think that's so important. And often, time is like the most valuable commodity in schools.
Yeah.
These are awesome.
Maybe one or two more, Julia, and then Gabrielle.
Yeah.
My takeaway is understanding that not all teachers have the opportunity to pick their own curriculum or have a say in what they want. That's right.
Maybe an honest class.
Supplement. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. One more, Julia, you want to do it?
I think, I like teachers need permission to teach the process.
Yes, they do. And that's
Yeah.
an extension of the science. All right. That
Yeah,
was
these are great. Thank you all so much. And again, like reading your thoughts, we learned so much from all of you. And we so appreciate, thinking about what you're currently encountering in classrooms and in education. It is so hard. It's toughest job. And I think teachers are the most hardworking folks around. So thank you. And thank you for your time and for your amazing contributions. So we're going to talk very briefly about choosing purposeful readings, and then we're going to we want to bring it to a close so that we are mindful of time, and we'll start off with this conversation. We'll start off next time. But when we're thinking about choosing purposeful readings, right, we want them to connect back to the critical understandings. And my understanding for my 8th grade unit was all about individual identities and how they're complex and they show themselves in many ways. So it was really a focus on different narratives, focusing on an event or a recounting from the author's life, and memoir, right? So that first person version of a time or an event. And so there's a variety of stories featured in the unit. House on Mango Street, which is one of my personal favorites. Short stories, Fish Cheeks by Amy Tan, The Jacket by Gary Soto, biography, the graphic novel, memoir, and, even thinking about Jacqueline Woodson's Brown Girl Dreaming, which is like another amazing text and written in free verse poetry. So, offering these purposeful readings that connect to this theme, but also are representative of a variety of genres. And I, hearing earlier this idea of we're teaching our kids that these different texts that we encounter, there's different types of texts and how we navigate them is going to be different. So, really offering exposure to a variety of texts. And here's 2 of the lists, right, of our resources. And again, I think it's important here, these are pretty big lists of books. They show a variety of texts. It's not necessary to use all of them, right? But there's options here for creating thematic text sets. And again, you want to think about identifying readings necessary to just support that knowledge of the knowledge base and the critical understandings, but you also want to support the development of academic language, right? So really important to think about both of those things. All right, so check out and connect. And as we're kind of closing out, you can put a thought or two in the chat box. But what are you taking away from this discussion regarding the blueprint and implementation? So what are sort of your takeaways? And you can put those in the chat. Again, I think for me, the blueprint, I really loved someone had thought about this, this idea of a guided thinking framework, this framework to really help teachers reflect and be purposeful in their instruction. But what are you taking away from tonight's discussion? Again, we love to hear from you. And it definitely it has a great impact connecting and revisiting. Yes, I took away that the blueprint is a philosophy of teaching. Importance of shared vocabulary, even for adults. Yes. Go beyond teaching skills, that I need to think about my approach to teaching comprehension and look forward to learning more. Process over product. I love seeing that a couple times. A more focused approach for teaching. thinking about being mindful of the process and purposeful in teaching that, helping students make connections and going beyond facts. Importance of really knowing that critical understanding, and then scaffolding using the framework to help them dig deeper for meaning. Intentional, or like I'm hearing those words. Reading comprehension is not assigning, but engaging. There's so many great thoughts. This idea that this process and product, it's reminding us to teach with whole fidelity, understanding all of the components. So, and it goes on and on. So thank you. These are such thoughtful, amazing comments. So for next time, we have this linked on the Padlet. So this was the curriculum review tool. And pick one. You don't have to do all. If you want to do all, you're more than welcome. But pick one of these areas, and thinking about the guiding questions here, reflect on that unit or text that you thought about earlier, right? Think about the resources and use those guiding questions to really kind of think about strengths and areas of development and next steps. You can think about the content goals, or you can think about the literacy goals. And we're going to kind of start off where we left off by finishing up some of our conversation around the purposeful texts, and then going back to this idea of the bidirectional arrow when we come back on February 15th.
Yeah.
We'll be talking about, I think, one of Nancy and I's favorite topics, vocabulary.
Yes. And so we're grateful we had this time with you to kind of build a foundation to revisit background knowledge. I'm sure for many of you, but perhaps for some of you new, or elaborate on your mental model. Our focus from this point on will be those contributors. And so there will be many more try this activities than we had this evening, because it'll be very focused on not just the unit and the lesson plan, but also on the activities themselves. So gratitude from both Julie and myself. And I know there's a slide that needs to be shared from Patton this evening. So